At 7:37 in the morning on June 8th, 2026, the first day of the Philippine school year, when millions of Filipino children were sitting down at their desks for the first time after summer break, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck 32 kilometers off the coast of Sarangani province in southern Mindanao. Students in General Santos City, a metropolitan area of 722,000 people, felt the ground move violently beneath their schools. Parts of St. Elizabeth Hospital in General Santos were severely damaged, forcing patients and medical staff to evacuate and temporarily operate outside the main hospital building. A Catholic nun traveling to Notre Dame of Dadiangas University described cars on the road moving erratically, like they were being shaken by invisible hands. PHIVOLCS, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, immediately issued tsunami warnings for the coasts of Sarangani, Davao Occidental, Tawi-Tawi, Sulu, Basilan, and several other provinces. Within the hour, tsunami waves were recorded at monitoring stations along the Sarangani coast, reaching approximately 1 meter in height. This was the most powerful earthquake to strike the Philippines in 5 decades. Described by GMA News as one of the most destructive earthquakes in the Philippines in the last 50 years, it brought back comparisons to the catastrophic earthquake that had struck the same region in 1976, an event so devastating that it reshaped how Filipinos understand their relationship with the sea. 2 months later, the sequence is not over. On August 6, 2026, 2 days ago, a magnitude 6. 4 earthquakes struck 53 kilometers southwest of Sarangani Island in the Celebes Sea, the same region, the same fault system, still producing significant events. Scientists are on alert because the fault that produced June 8's magnitude 7.8 has not finished speaking, and because the historical record of what this specific fault system is capable of producing makes sustained attention not just prudent but necessary. Let me explain why this particular earthquake event, and the fault system behind it, deserves the kind of sustained scientific attention it is receiving. The Philippines is arguably the most seismically complex archipelago on Earth. While Japan, Indonesia, and Chile receive more coverage for major earthquake events, the Philippines sits at a junction of tectonic forces that rivals any of those nations in the diversity and number of active fault systems operating simultaneously. The archipelago sits on what geoscientists call the Philippines Mobile Belt, a collection of island arcs, ophiolites, and volcanic chains that have been assembled over millions of years by the collision and subduction of multiple tectonic plates from different directions simultaneously. From the east, the Philippine Sea Plate is subducting westward beneath Mindanao and the eastern Philippine archipelago along the Philippine Trench, one of the deepest trenches in the world. From the west, oceanic crust of the Sonda Plate and the Celebes Sea is subducting eastward beneath Mindanao and the Cotabato Arc along the Cotabato Trench. The Philippine Fault, a major north-south striking strike-slip fault running through the length of the archipelago, accommodates the lateral component of the plate convergence. And in the north, the Manila Trench accommodates the subduction of the South China Sea Plate beneath Luzon, multiple subduction zones, a major strike-slip fault traversing the entire country, a volcanic arc built by the long history of convergence. And underneath all of this, a population of 109 million people distributed across 7,641 islands. Many of them in coastal communities with limited elevation above sea level and buildings constructed to standards that have not historically accounted for the seismic environment they sit in. The June 8th earthquake was produced by the Cotabato Trench, not the Philippine Trench to the east, which most people associate with the Philippines' most catastrophic historical earthquakes, but the Cotabato Trench to the west, in the Moro Gulf and Celebes Sea. The Cotabato Trench lies off the southwestern coast of Mindanao, where oceanic crust of the Sunda Plate beneath the Celebes Sea subducts beneath the Philippines Mobile Belt. The strike-slip component of this convergence is partly accommodated by the Cotabato Fault System, a network of northwest-southeast trending left lateral faults forming the boundary between the Cotabato Arc and the central Mindanao volcanic belt. PHIVOLCS confirmed in its primer on the June 8th earthquake that the Cotabato Trench was responsible for the event. The agency also confirmed that the earthquake's history in this zone is not new. Between 1917 and 2023, at least 7 significant earthquakes with magnitudes ranging from M5, 7 to M8. 0 affected Sarangani and nearby provinces. The most recent damaging event before June 8, 2026 was a M6. 8 that struck on November 17, 2023. The zone is persistently active, but the specific comparison that matters most for understanding why scientists are watching closely is not any of the recent moderate events. It is what happened in this same general area on August 16, 1976. The 1976 Mindanao earthquake struck the Moro Gulf, the same body of water, the same fault system, at a magnitude of approximately 8. 0. It was the deadliest natural disaster in the Philippines in the 20th century. The earthquake generated a catastrophic tsunami that swept coastal communities around the Moro Gulf. The death toll was approximately 8,000 people. Entire coastal villages were swept away. The tsunami waves arrived faster than evacuation was possible for many communities that had no warning of the earthquake's potential to generate a destructive wave. The 1976 event is the specific precedent that defines the outer boundary of what the Cotabato Trench fault system can produce, and it is the reason that the June 8, 2026 M7, 8, which occurred on the same fault system at a slightly lower magnitude, was treated immediately and seriously as a tsunami threat. The June 8 tsunami warning system response is worth examining specifically, because it illustrates both what has improved since 1976 and what the remaining challenges are. 5LCS issued its tsunami warning within minutes of the earthquake's origin time. The agency's 128-station seismic network across the Philippines provided near-instantaneous location and magnitude data that allowed the tsunami warning decision to be made before any wave had reached shore. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center also issued assessments for neighboring countries and ocean basins. Tsunami waves of approximately 1 meter were recorded at 5LCS sea level monitoring stations in Kiamba and Masim, Sarangani, and smaller waves in Mati City and Zamboanga City. These were measured, not estimated. The monitoring infrastructure was in place and functioning. The 1 meter wave height, while significantly smaller than what the 1976 event produced, was sufficient to cause concern and required evacuation of coastal areas for communities that were already at school when the earthquake struck. On the first day of the school year, the combination of a school evacuation and a tsunami warning represented an extraordinary emergency response demand in the first 30 minutes of what should have been a routine school morning. The Philippine National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council coordinated response across the affected provinces. Search and rescue operations were launched in General Santos City and surrounding municipalities. Emergency supplies and multinational support were activated. The death toll, at 19 to 32 people confirmed in various reports, represents a significant improvement over what the 1976 analog produced for a slightly smaller event. That improvement reflects decades of investment in Philippine earthquake and tsunami preparedness infrastructure. The 5LCS seismic network, the tsunami warning system, the community-level disaster preparedness programs, the school evacuation drills that became standard practice after prior devastating events. It does not reflect an absence of danger. It reflects functioning systems that gave some people the information and time they needed to make the right decision. The aftershock sequence from the June 8th earthquake has been substantial and ongoing. PHIVOLCS reported more than an hour of aftershocks after the initial event, with significant felt events continuing in the days and weeks that followed. The NDRRMC situation report from July 21st, 2026 was still active. More than 6 weeks after the main shock, the Philippine Disaster Management System was still producing daily situational updates on the earthquake's ongoing consequences. And then, on August 6, 2026, the M6, 4 in the Salibi Sea, 53 kilometers southwest of Sarangani Island, confirmed what the pattern had been suggesting. The fault system was not done. A magnitude 6, 4, aftershock 2 months after M7. 8, main shock is consistent with the statistical models of aftershock sequences. Under Omori's law, the mathematical description of how aftershock rates decay with time. The frequency of aftershocks decreases over time following a major earthquake, but the largest aftershocks can occur weeks or months after the main shock. Aftershocks that occur after a prolonged period of apparent quieting can be particularly dangerous in a compound disaster context, because the population affected by the main shock may have partially returned to routine. Structures that were damaged in the June 8th main shock and the subsequent aftershock sequence are in a compromised state going into any future significant aftershock. The M64 on August 6th would have been a significant earthquake on its own terms, capable of producing strong to very strong intensity at nearby locations, potentially causing additional damage to already weakened structures and generating renewed anxiety in communities that have been managing earthquake stress for 2 months. Scientists are watching the Cotabato Trench system specifically for several reasons that go beyond the immediate aftershock sequence. The zone that produced June 8's M7. 8 has a documented history of producing M8. 0 events. The 1976 earthquake demonstrated that. The geological understanding of this fault system suggests that the stress released in the June 8th event, while substantial, may not have fully resolved the accumulated strain on the entire Cotabato Trench system. The specific portion of the fault that ruptured on June 8th altered the Coulomb stress on adjacent portions of the trench system, some segments potentially loading toward failure, others potentially relaxing. The scientific work of understanding that stress redistribution is actively underway at PHIVOLCS and at international seismological institutions, and it is part of why sustained monitoring is the appropriate response. The Philippines' specific vulnerability to major earthquake and tsunami events is worth articulating directly because the June 8th event and its aftermath illustrate a risk profile that the country manages on an ongoing basis with limited resources relative to the scale of the hazard. The Philippines experiences approximately 100 to 150 earthquakes, strong enough to be felt every year. The archipelago's position at the intersection of multiple active plate boundaries means that major earthquakes, M7, 0 and above, are not rare occurrences, but rather regular features of the geological landscape. The historical record shows major damaging earthquakes in the Philippines occurring in 1948, 1955, 1968, 1970, 1976, 1983, 1990, 1994, 1999, 2002, 2013, 2019, 2021, 2022, and now 2026. An average of roughly one damaging major earthquake every 3 to 4 years. Against that backdrop, the Philippines has built a disaster preparedness and response system that is genuinely impressive relative to the economic constraints under which it operates. FIVOLCS's 128-station seismic monitoring network, the NDRRMC coordination framework, the OCDP community-level preparedness programs, and the integration of earthquake and tsunami preparedness into the national school curriculum are all real and functioning elements of a system that has demonstrably saved lives compared to the outcomes of equivalent events in earlier eras. The June 8th death toll, tragic as it is not the 8,000 of 1976 on a comparable or larger event. That gap represents human investment in early warning, and preparedness and institutional capacity. The challenges that remain are also specific and honest. The Philippines' building stock in Mindanao includes a significant proportion of structures that were not designed to modern seismic standards, and that the country does not currently have the resources to systematically retrofit or replace. The coastal communities most at risk from tsunami are often the ones most economically dependent on the sea, fishing communities and coastal market towns whose livelihoods require proximity to the water, and whose ability to relocate to higher ground is constrained by economic and cultural reality. The monitoring system that performed well on June 8th depends on sustained government funding that must compete with other pressing national priorities. And the aftershock sequence, exemplified by the August 6th and 6.4, represents an ongoing compound stress on a population and a physical infrastructure that have been managing the consequences of June 8th for 2 months. What this situation requires from the international audience watching it is not emergency action, but informed attention, and, where possible, appropriate support. The UNICEF Philippines emergency response to the June 8th earthquake noted that emergency supplies and multipurpose cash had been prepositioned for the response. Exactly the kind of institutional infrastructure that makes a difference in the days immediately following a major earthquake. Organizations with established in-country presence in Mindanao are the appropriate channel for anyone seeking to support the ongoing recovery. For anyone living in the Philippines, particularly in southern Mindanao and the provinces adjacent to the Sarangani coast, FIVOLCS is the authoritative monitoring agency. Its earthquake and tsunami advisories are the primary information source that determines appropriate protective action. In the current period of ongoing aftershock activity following the June 8 main shock, any subsequent earthquake that is perceived as strong should be treated with the assumption of potential tsunami generation if you are in a coastal area, even if the shaking is less severe than June 8th. Secondary earthquakes on adjacent fault segments can generate tsunami waves independent of the main shock's pattern. Move away from the coast into higher ground immediately following any strong shaking without waiting for an official warning. The 1976 and 2026 events both demonstrate that this fault system is capable of generating waves that arrive faster than formal warning protocols can be communicated to every affected community. The scientists are on alert because the fault that produced the most powerful Philippines earthquake in 50 years is still active, because the geological and historical record of this fault system includes M8.0 events with catastrophic tsunami consequences, and because the aftershock sequence 2 months later is still producing significant events. The appropriate response to that alert is continued monitoring, continued preparedness, and continued attention to a hazard that does not resolve on a human timescale but demands human-scale preparation. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.